997 turbo chassis, one that's been crashed and one that has not, one that has OEM paint and one that's, well, orange. Which one to go with? That's the question that I'm going to answer today, and we're going to get started working on the solution. Taking all your feedback into account, there were a lot of people, most people I would say, said to fix the current chassis, but that was before you guys knew I had another chassis and that I got it for free. So I think that would sway some people's minds in that scenario. The reality of it is, what's going to make the best final result? What's going to be the best end product? And in my opinion, it's swapping to the new chassis. A lot of guys said to go with V-tuned or collaborate with those guys. Big YouTubers are hard to get in touch with because they just get flooded with emails and DMs and comments. So it'd be hard to get in touch with those guys to begin with. Would they want to collaborate with someone small like me? Probably not. And even if they did and they got this car perfectly straightened out and I found a body shop to graft on the new quarter panel and the inner wheel well and the rear tail section and all that, still a car that's been crashed numerous times. So for me and me personally, swapping to the clean chassis is the best route. It's going to be very hard for me to sell this car. So more than likely, I'll be keeping it. Having a vid plate or two that don't match isn't going to bother me. All this is documented on the internet, and I know the car is going to turn out really, really nice. So if I am going to be swapping the chassis, one of the first things the car is going to need is paint. But how do you paint a car if you can't move it around? I don't have a dolly. Of course, I could build one, but if I have to swap the suspension over at some point anyway, I might as well swap it over before paint, and it's just going to make the whole process easier. I've made my decision, for now, at least. So out come the front and rear subframes of the car. Shouldn't be that terrible. I really just have to disconnect a few electrical connectors, I think, some brake lines, and then some big old bolts. Drop them out, push them outside to the new car, and see how much time I have today, bolt them up to the orange one. The rear subframe is pretty easy to remove, all things considering. It's held in by 3 18mm bolts or nuts on either side, totaling 6. But those aren't the difficult pieces to remove, it's everything else that makes this job a little more difficult. There's the middle subframe brace, brake lines on both sides, brackets for brake lines and ABS connectors, and the parking brakes as well. I'm going to take these out all completed as a set, so I need to remove the strut nuts as well. So now that I have a game plan, let's get to work. First to come off are the hard brake lines on either side. They're secured with a 10mm nut. I wanted to get them off so I could get the brake fluid draining, so hopefully it doesn't spill out everywhere during the swap. Next came the brackets for the ABS sensors, the brake wear sensors. Those are each held on with 10mm bolts or nuts. Super simple to get out. Then it's time to move over to the driver's side. Something you should always do, it's going to save yourself time and hassle in the long run, is put bolts and nuts back where you took them off. So the bolt that went on top where all the sensors kind of come together, the connector by the upper rear control arms, put that back in, and the bolt that goes back on the subframe that holds on the brake lines and all that sort of stuff, I threw that back in there as well. And so far I don't have to bag and tag anything, everything's back in its place. By the way, I made a new Porsche shirt on the website here because this one, the whole copyright thing, it's a fight I'm losing. So I designed new ones. Hopefully you guys like them. You can check them out at boostedapexdesigns.com. What's interesting about these rear subframes is they're actually two separate pieces. If you saw when I removed the engine, I removed the center section to get the engine out. So technically, There are 2 rear subframes, but nevertheless, there shouldn't be anything stopping me from removing them now, so I just gotta support them, unbolt the coilovers, and unbolt the 3 subframe bolts. Hopefully it drops out with ease. Well, that's tight. They're all freaking super tight. My Ryobi impact just isn't cutting it anymore. I forgot about the parking brake. Shoot. Yeah, definitely gonna need to get the parking brake. Not only did I forget about the parking brake, I forgot about the strut nuts up top, and I forgot about the Lintronics bracket. So I was nowhere near close or ready to be dropping the subframe bolts and lowering the subframe itself. There are a few different ways to go about getting the parking brake cables removed from the whole hub assembly. My first thought was I'd just take the brake caliper and rotor off and disconnect it in there, and then I got to looking at it and I'm like, this is actually going to be a lot more work. And I also thought to myself, if I have to swap everything over anyway, I'm already going to need the parking brake cables, so it made a lot more sense just to remove the center console, disconnect the cables from the parking brake, and pull the cables out from under the chassis completely. What I really came for, just getting these cables off, which this already looks much different than 996, but it shouldn't be too bad. Look at that. Now, hopefully I can pull these through, because I know sometimes they can get seized in there. Oh wow, that was way easier than I thought it would be. Awesome, freaking awesome. How about this side? Oh, outstanding. That makes me happy. Now I can put that rotor and brake back together. Now, with all that extra fuss out of the way, let's drop this thing for real. Can I do this without everything falling? I think we're good now. No holdups here getting the subframe out. You just have to make sure that it doesn't get caught up on the one stud. There's only one stud towards the front of the car, and the subframe bushing can get hung up in there pretty easily. Awesome. Just have to repeat it on the other side, which I think will go smoother. Gotta get the shocks. Perfect. Only needed one jack this time. Oh golly. Yes. Outstanding. With both sides of the subframe out of the car, it's time to get them out of the way, assess them. You can see just how dirty they are. You'll see that in just a little bit. and then make sure I put all the bolts, nuts, and halves of the bushings back where they belong so I don't lose them. I present to you two very, very dirty rear subframes. So you know what's coming up next, a deep cleaning on those. However, before that, I'd like to take the front out. I hope it goes just as smooth, or maybe even a little smoother. I don't know if the axle is going to be in the way and all that good stuff, but yeah, I'll find out. Inspecting the front end to see what all I need to start tearing apart, but I need a little more space. My garage is small, as you guys know. Got to get the hood up, but of course it won't stay up. The real OGs should remember this broomstick, because I can't lift it high enough because it hits the ceiling. But the broomstick saved the day, so it's time to get underneath it and remove 5 to 10 Torx bolts that hold this under tray in place. Really easy to do, falls right off, and then it's time to look at everything and try to figure out the next step in this process. However, after looking at it for a while and thinking about it for a while, I came to a realization. This was going to be a mountain of work. The steering shaft, the steering box, all the suspension, the front diff, this was going to be way more work than I initially thought, so I think my time was better off spent cleaning the rear subframe and getting that installed in the orange chassis. These subframes are really dirty and grimy. You can tell they've been sitting in a body shop for years and years and years. These parts needed a lot more than just a power wash, so I broke out the red spray bottle with degreaser inside it, soaked everything down, and then it was time to hit everything with a brush. The goal was not to get everything perfect, but it needed to be a lot better. This thing was nasty, dirty, grimy, covered in body shop dust, needed a lot of work, so I actually did each side twice. Pressure wash, degreaser, scrub, repeat. Nice. These came out pretty good, except for the rusty rotors and the fact that some of the control arms didn't clean up as well as I'd like. Maybe some steel wool would help that. You can at least see the blue of the springs, and everything just overall looks a lot cleaner with less grease. So it's time to install them. There's just one problem. I've got to jack the car back up because where I have the jack stands at now, it's blocking the front studs that the subframe needs to obviously bolt into. The subframes together aren't light, but separate, they're not too bad. It is pretty nice that they are in two pieces. That means this is kind of a job you can do by yourself with just a jack. You don't need some kind of ATV lift or something that large. You don't need two people. You can put each side up individually, one at a time, and it's pretty simple. Kudos to Porsche for this design. Also makes engine removal easier. Once the giant cobweb was cleared out of the way, no spider found, moved on to the inside, and it's time to install the 3 nuts that hold the strut in, tighten them down, torque to spec, and that side's done. I don't know who decided to put this car right next to the E30. It was a terrible idea. Ouch. Oh, that hurt. That hurt a lot. After recovering from a near concussion, it's time to hoist the driver's side up, get it jacked up into place, and bolted down, which went just as easily and smoothly as the passenger side. All relative, this is pretty simple stuff. I was happy. I'm thinking the front is going to be a lot more difficult. Oh, I didn't bring any of my bolts or nuts over here. Now, if you're wondering why I haven't torqued any of these subframe bolts, well, it's because it doesn't matter. In all seriousness, these subframes are likely to come back out at some point because there might be a line or a hose or electrical connector that I missed that these might be in the way of. So, at a later date, they will be torqued to spec. You know the drill. More spider webs.
In the presence of a king.
Well, that went pretty nice and smoothly. Would have loved to have gotten the front end done as well, but I underestimated how much work that's going to be with the steering and the axle and all that. It's going to be a lot of work. So I'm going to wrap this one up, and that'll be in a later video. So now that the rear's done, I'm going to move on to the front. Now, whether that means I start tearing the fenders, the hood, and all that stuff off, or I move underneath and do the suspension, I'm not sure, but that's next in line with this car.